Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about bicep training. And I know that's going to sound funny that we need to talk about this, and I think what people who are out there training don't always realize is that a lot of times there's a big divergence in the lifting world, and what you oftentimes see is that a lot of guys who are very serious about strength have a disdain towards bodybuilding. And a lot of people who classify themselves as bodybuilders maybe aren't really bodybuilders. Like they've never been on a stage, never oiled up and dieted down to 6% body fat. Pro tip, you're not a bodybuilder. So a lot of people from that world don't realize that there is that actual disdain there sometimes. And you'll see that even with some power lifters. There are a lot of power lifters and strongmen and other people who have a very, very strong dislike of anything associated with bodybuilding. And people who pursue the latter may not understand that. They may not even understand why, and that's okay. You don't have to. There's a lot of reasons. But essentially, what you'll see sometimes is that we take that so far in the strength world to where we say, well, I'm not going to do curls because, then I'll be a bodybuilder, and next thing you know, I'll be selling my butt for growth hormone, prancing around in my panties oiled up on the stage. Like it's almost that stepping stone fallacy. And it's just not true. It's almost a ridiculous mindset, and I've been guilty of it myself. But what we need to remember is that if you want to remove that mindset, you need to remember an exercise is just an exercise. Okay, there really is no such thing as a power lifting exercise or a bodybuilding exercise. There really is no such thing. Those are forms of competition. And people oftentimes who are winners in both of those forms of competition don't even train anything like the other guys who they're beating or competing with or at the same level with. Their training styles might be so dramatically different that you wouldn't even think they compete in the same thing. Okay, and people need to remember that. So when it comes to something like a curl, here's a different way to look at it. Curls can technically be a deadlift accessory, or they can be a bench press accessory. Now, people say, well, I don't get either one of those. And it's like, well, okay, let's use a chain of logic. Especially when you see me do the band curls later. What's one of our big concerns on a deadlift? Bicep tendons. Very high rep band curls, and we'll just cover this one briefly first, with the bands can strengthen tendons. And it has to do with the overspeed eccentric the bands create, which again creates fast eccentric loading, which tends to cause micro tearing, and it's adaptative micro tearing in your tendons. Okay, this can hypertrophy tendons, in addition to the fact that even really very, very high rep movements can still create hypertrophy. And we know that extremely fast compensatory acceleration movements, even with a lighter weight, do engage upper threshold fibers long before failure. We've even seen Knuckles talk about that. So something like this could certainly be used both for, again, almost recovery in some cases, for building connective tissue, strengthening connective tissue to make it more resilient to tearing, in addition to actual bicep growth. So let's come over to the point with the bicep growth. Well, what is one of the main supplemental lifts for a deadlift? Rows, strict rows. I don't care whether it's a pen lay row, a chest supported row, whatever. We know that there's generally a significant contribution of those lifts to your deadlift. In fact, I have oftentimes said that if I can take a lifter and get them very strong on strict rows, and I do mean strict, in other words, very strong on a strict row means no torso movement, full range of motion, even 135 for sets of 10 is quite strong. And I know a lot of guys who are like, I only deadlift 365 and I can do that. No, you can't. Go film yourself doing the rows. I promise you, you're flopping around like a fish. Because if you could do 10 reps with 135 on a very strict pen lay row for sets of 10, you have zero hamstrings. The only way you only deadlift 365 is because you'd have no hamstrings. That's the only possible explanation. Your back is strong enough to probably deadlift 450 to 500. Okay, so at that point, it's your hamstrings and glutes that are preventing you from deadlifting 500. Your upper body is strong enough. So it is a critical accessory movement. Well, like with everything else, even when we have a bigger movement, it still has weak points. And for a lot of guys, if you haven't been training your biceps, sometimes your biceps can become the weak link on rowing. Right? And I'm not talking about noobs. This doesn't mean that noob, someone who's been training for 6 months and total novice standard. If you bench 155 for reps and squat 200 for reps, I'm not talking about you. Okay? Not saying curls are going to hurt you, but they're not going to be the key to your rows going up. But if your biceps are weak, they could turn into the weak link on your rowing. Stronger biceps usually make gripping the bar easier. Right? They sometimes prevent you from having a weakness up at the top, because when the biceps are contracted on the way up and you need the scapula to retract, sometimes if the biceps are a weak link, you're going to struggle with the scapular retraction part of rows, particularly when they get fatiguing. It can reduce your workload. So biceps can be a supplemental lift for your rows, particularly if they're a weak link, particularly if you struggle maybe at the top when the biceps contracted and you're trying to pull the scapula together. Because you do need to pull them together. Anyone who tries to keep their scapula retracted on a row, there's a reason you suck. There's a reason you're weak and have a weak back. You need to spread your scapula and lats at the bottom. You only retract them at the top. But again, biceps can be an issue there. So again, it can turn into a deadlift accessory down the chain. And again, I wouldn't discount that. And we're kind of killing two birds with one stone sometimes. We're sometimes teaching our biceps to learn to contract from a stretched position, right, which can help prevent tears, and some of the stuff can help build the tendons to prevent tears. What about the bench press? All right, well, we run into issues of being a dynamic stabilizer as well as active recruitment. Look at some of the EMG data on the bench press. When your grip gets wide, guys who particularly wide grip bench press, the biceps actually contract a lot harder than you might realize. When they start hooking EMG data up, the wider that grip goes, the more bicep involvement you have. Okay. Furthermore, biceps are a dynamic stabilizer. You know, then people will use this whole logic, well, the stabilizers on the other side don't matter. These muscles all contract together. Okay. Weak hamstrings can interfere with your maximum squat, even though they're not a primary mover, because they contract together. All right, muscles don't contract the way that people think they do. Oh, just the joint you're bending, that's the only side that matters. No, your actual strength output and stability in the lift is impacted by how strong you are on even opposing muscles of the primary movers. Okay? They are, again, a dynamic stabilizer for your elbow. So that can affect your bench press. Is it going to make a massive difference? No, but when you're chasing every pound possible and you say, I want to be as strong as possible, well, you better start thinking about that. What about the compression factor? What? Yeah. You notice some guys when they throw on sleeves, even loose sleeves, get another 10 pound on their bench press. Why do you think that is? Because they're compressing something at the elbow. What's the hardest part of a raw bench press? The bottom. That's the hardest part. Your pecs are under the most mechanical tension, and they have the largest mechanical disadvantage at the bottom. And that's why it's a very frequent weak link. And it doesn't mean that, you know, it's everyone's weak link by any means, because the pecs aren't always going to be your weak link on the bench. However, the bottom is oftentimes the most difficult part, and the faster you can get the weight started out of the bottom, the better you're going to be on a raw bench press. The biceps are compressed against the arm. And if you think about it, it might not matter to a certain size, but if you look at how much your biceps are compressed up against the base of the forearm, which actually can create a decent amount of leverage, and then you think in terms of what happened if I add another inch to that bicep and the brachialis, and even the radial brachialis, because they're going to press against the radial brachialis. If you were to add an inch to that area, you're going to have a little more compression. It can create a very small, and albeit it's a very small, spring-like effect, but look at where it is on the joint angle. It can create a very small spring-like effect at the hardest, point of the bench to help you get it started a little bit faster. Okay, that could be worth, particularly for a strong bencher, that could be worth 5, 7, maybe 10 pounds on your max bench. The bicep is technically not a high priority, but it is technically a bench press accessory. Okay, doesn't mean this is just for bodybuilders. Right? So it's possible for you to train your biceps seriously without being obsessed with your physique. Okay? They do have a role as far as strength goes. And I know we say it's probably one of the most useless muscles for strength. And there's a degree of truth to that. Obviously, there's a dozen other muscles that are more important. But realistically, if you're trying to chase down every pound you can possibly get on your bench press, I can assure you adding another inch to your biceps is not going to hurt that endeavor. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.